The universe was about to learn a terrifying truth, the one it had long overlooked. Earth was a Class 13 death world. For eons, the galaxy had categorized planets, ranking them based on the dangers they presented. Class 1 worlds were peaceful, while Class 15 worlds teemed with unimaginable threats. But Earth, with its seemingly fragile humans, had always been considered harmless, a mere blip among the countless stars. Until now. The moment Earth's status was revealed, the galactic order trembled. The vast empires that spanned the cosmos suddenly faced a daunting question. What if humanity had been hiding its true potential all along? What if we weren't the simple-minded, fragile species they thought we were? Earth's transition from a benign underestimation to a powerful, unpredictable force shook the galaxy to its core. Alien empires had spent centuries building vast weapons, armies, and war strategies, each designed to control or wipe out any threat. But nothing prepared them for the raw, relentless power that Earth unleashed. While the galaxy had danced on the thin edge of peace, comfortably assuming humans were no more than pests, Earth's warriors, scientists, and even civilians began showing abilities no one anticipated. The war tactics the alien civilizations had so carefully constructed became useless. What Earth lacked in technology and resources, they made up for in ingenuity, resilience, and an innate determination to survive. The very traits that made humanity seem weak became the force that shattered the galactic peace. The central figures in this revolution weren't warriors with weapons, but the unlikeliest of leaders, everyday men and women who had been forced into the chaos of intergalactic conflict. A brilliant strategist from a small town, a scientist whose research had been dismissed as irrelevant, and a soldier who barely knew how to wield a weapon became the catalyst for the change. They showed that Earth's strength lay not in its might, but in its spirit, one that couldn't be easily crushed. But as the Galactic Council convened to plan a retaliation, whispers of a hidden weapon surfaced. Some believed it was an ancient Earth artifact, others thought it was a new technology humanity had developed in secret. The question hung in the air: what was Earth's true power, and was it more terrifying than anyone could have imagined? As tension builds, the galaxy's greatest minds begin to focus on one singular truth. Earth, the planet once deemed insignificant, might now be the most dangerous force in the universe. And the true battle, the one that could either save or destroy the galaxy, was only just beginning. The moment humanity's enemies realized they had underestimated us, they feared the worst. But what came next would shock them even more. The clock was ticking, and Earth's next move was coming fast, one that no one, not even the most powerful beings in the galaxy, could predict. Would they be ready? Or had they pushed humanity too far? The galaxy had long operated under an unspoken rule: never underestimate the power of the status quo. The Galactic Council, made up of representatives from the universe's most powerful races, thrived on balance. Empires grew in size, but the number of true threats remained limited. The majority of life forms were predictable, tame even. And Earth, with its primitive weapons and volatile atmosphere, seemed like an afterthought in the grand scheme of things. That is, until the Class 13 designation shattered everything. The Council had never expected humanity to be capable of the sheer rawness that had erupted across the cosmos. For centuries, they had watched Earth struggle against its own limitations, ravaged by war, disease, and natural disaster. Its people were often at odds, living in constant chaos. But they had no idea that this very chaos had forged something unique, something that would soon prove to be the downfall of their carefully cultivated empire. It started small. At first, it was just whispers, rumors, and scattered reports. A group of explorers from a distant star system reported being ambushed by a seemingly insignificant force. Humans, armed with nothing more than outdated weaponry, had outsmarted and overwhelmed them. Then came the larger battles. The once thought invincible alien fleets, sophisticated and technologically superior, were repelled by human ingenuity and sheer willpower. Suddenly, the universe's top commanders found themselves baffled by an enemy they couldn't predict or control. And it was becoming clearer by the day: Earth's resistance wasn't just a fluke. It was a new way of fighting, unconventional, unpredictable, and fiercely determined. But what exactly was driving this resilience? Some thought it was a secret weapon, something humans had kept hidden for centuries. Others speculated that it was the Earthlings' sheer desperation. After all, their planet had been ravaged by their own hands for generations. If they were to survive, they had to be stronger than anyone could fathom. But deep within the war rooms of the alien empires, one truth loomed over all others. They had underestimated the will of humanity. Among the humans who had unknowingly triggered this galactic awakening was a group of scientists working in the depths of Earth's research facilities. They had been studying unknown cosmic phenomena, hoping to unlock the mysteries of the universe, when they stumbled upon something they couldn't explain. A strange energy signature that seemed to emanate from Earth itself, an ancient force, dormant for millennia, now awakening. Was it a power of the Earth itself, waiting to be tapped? Or something far older, far more dangerous, tied to the very essence of humanity? At the same time, a small, unassuming group of human warriors became the focal point of this resistance. They weren't soldiers by training. They were ordinary people thrust into the chaos. A young ex-soldier turned guerrilla leader, a former scientist turned weapons expert, and a skilled tactician whose background in chess made them a master of unpredictable moves. Together, they formed the core of Earth's rebellion. They had nothing but their grit and their wits, but somehow they were succeeding where every other force in the galaxy had failed. The mystery behind Earth's newfound strength wasn't just about weapons or tactics, it was something far deeper. The key to understanding this power seemed to lie in a series of cryptic messages that had been found in an ancient human text, written by an unknown civilization that had once existed on Earth. The text hinted at a time when humans had once commanded a far greater power, one that had been lost, or perhaps deliberately hidden. And now, as the alien forces prepared to launch their final, all-out offensive to crush the humans, one question remained: would humanity's hidden power be enough to overcome the galaxy's might? Or would the ancient secret buried within Earth's history finally be unlocked, revealing a force so terrifying that even the strongest empires would tremble in fear? As Earth's defenders geared up for what could be their final stand, the air was thick with uncertainty. What had humanity uncovered? And, more importantly, what had they unleashed? The countdown had begun. The next move was theirs, but would they be ready for the consequences? As the galaxy's greatest powers converged on Earth, the stage was set for a clash that would either redefine the universe's balance or tear it apart forever. And as the first ships appeared on Earth's horizon, no one knew if humanity's secret weapon would be their salvation or their doom. The air on Earth had shifted. What had once been a planet divided by endless wars, corruption, and inequality was now united under a single, primal instinct: survival. The global leaders had long bickered over petty disputes, but the sudden revelation that their world was a Class 13 death world had transformed everything. The very nature of humanity had been thrust into the spotlight, but was it the drive for survival that had unleashed Earth's true power? Or was it something far more elusive, something buried deep within humanity's DNA, something the galaxy had never considered? Across the planet, resistance groups had been rallying together, joining forces despite their differences. The young ex-soldier turned leader, once known for his rebellious streak, had become a symbol of hope. He was known only as the Commander, a name that had come to represent humanity's defiance. His tactical genius was unmatched, but it wasn't just his military mind that had earned him the respect of so many. It was his unwavering belief that humanity's strength lay not in weapons, but in the hearts and minds of its people. But as the alien forces began to close in, even his confidence started to falter. Every victory they'd achieved so far felt like a mere delay in the inevitable. The alien forces were too vast, too powerful, too prepared. How could humanity hope to stand against them? Meanwhile, the scientist who had once been ridiculed for her fringe theories had become humanity's last hope. Dr. Lila Vance, a biologist by trade, had stumbled upon something that seemed too absurd to believe: an ancient, dormant genetic code hidden within every human. A set of instructions left behind by a civilization that had been wiped from history. This code was said to unlock a latent ability in humans, a power so immense it could shift the balance of the entire galaxy. It was an idea so radical that even her closest colleagues had dismissed it as fiction. But now, the implications of her findings were impossible to ignore. Could it be that Earth's ancestors had once possessed unimaginable power, only to lose it when they fell to war and darkness? And could that power be awakened in time to save them from the galactic invasion? The discovery had only deepened the mystery. According to the old texts she had uncovered, humanity's ancestors had known how to harness energy from the very fabric of space itself, a technology that could make entire fleets of starships obsolete in an instant. But the knowledge had been lost, scattered across centuries of conflict, and buried under the weight of history. Yet the question remained, if humanity had that kind of power, why had they never used it? Was it a gift or a curse? As the countdown to the final battle against the alien empire ticked on, factions within Earth's leadership began to splinter. Some believed that the only way to survive was to accept their fate and negotiate with the alien invaders. After all, their fleets were already in orbit, and Earth's defenses, while impressive, were no match for the might of a unified galactic force. These leaders called for surrender, hoping that a peaceful resolution might spare Earth from total destruction. But the commander and his allies were not so easily swayed. Surrender was not an option. To give in now would mean the end of humanity's very soul. In the midst of this internal conflict, the mysterious alien weapon rumored to be an artifact of unimaginable power was closer than ever to being revealed. Some believed it was an ancient relic, while others thought it was something more. A living entity capable of bending the fabric of reality itself. Its discovery could tip the scales in humanity's favor, but only if they could reach it before the aliens did. As the final battle loomed, the tension on Earth reached a boiling point. Even the once skeptical military leaders who had doubted the power of human unity now found themselves placing their trust in the hands of ordinary citizens, people who had come together out of sheer necessity. The fate of their world rested on the shoulders of those who had always been overlooked. Was that what had made humanity so dangerous in the first place? Their ability to unite when it mattered most? But even as Earth's defenders prepared for the storm that was about to hit, a new, terrifying piece of information emerged. A deep space signal, one that had been sent out by Earth's greatest minds years ago, had finally been received. But it wasn't from another world. It came from within their own galaxy, an unknown force, one that had been watching humanity for longer than anyone realized. And now, this entity was making its move. What did they want? Were they friend or foe? As Earth's fate hung in the balance, the final pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. But with time running out, one question lingered in the air. Could humanity's deepest secrets be enough to secure its future? Or had their enemies already learned too much to be stopped? The final days before the invasion felt like an eternity. Every corner of Earth seemed to be holding its breath, waiting for the inevitable. The skies, once clear and open, the global resistance had assembled, but even their best commanders knew that time was running out. The enemy was too vast, too advanced. The strategies they had devised might delay the inevitable, but they couldn't win the war. Not unless something extraordinary happened. The commander, who had once stood at the front lines of countless battles, now found himself pacing through the dimly lit command center. His hands clenched into fists, his mind racing with thoughts of failure. He'd led men and women into every kind of conflict. But this was different. This wasn't just a fight for land or power. It was a fight for humanity's very existence. The resistance forces had managed to hold their ground for weeks, but it was clear they could not last much longer. Dr. Lila Vance's discovery had been their last hope. The ancient texts, the dormant genetic code, the cryptic messages, everything she had uncovered, pointed to one simple truth. Humanity had the potential to become something far more than it had ever imagined. The genetic code buried within their DNA might be the key to unlocking powers beyond comprehension. But time was running out. Could they activate it in time? And if they did, would it be enough to stop the overwhelming alien force that was descending on them? The question plagued Dr. Vance as she stood in her lab staring at the data streaming across her terminal. She had been working around the clock, pushing her team to the limits of exhaustion, trying to unlock the secrets of the ancient power hidden within humans. But even she couldn't deny the fear gnawing at her. What if the genetic code wasn't enough? What if the key to humanity's salvation wasn't a biological force at all, but something darker, something they couldn't control? The idea had haunted her for days. If they unleashed this power without fully understanding it, what would be left of Earth? Or of humanity? As she worked, the signals from the deep space anomaly began to intensify. It was becoming clear now the mysterious force watching them wasn't just observing. It was coming closer, its presence undeniable. What did they want? Were they allies, or had they been waiting for this moment to strike? The signal's pattern, once erratic and cryptic, now seemed to form a clear, deliberate message. But even as she tried to decode it, a feeling of dread settled over her. The closer she got to understanding, the more dangerous it seemed. Meanwhile, the commander was preparing for the last battle. Earth's forces had gathered every last resource, every fighter, every ship, every weapon. They had no more time to strategize or train. This was it. The final stand. Their fate had already been decided by the enemy's vast fleets in orbit, but they couldn't give up. Not when there was a chance, however slim, that they could turn the tide. But there was another factor that no one had counted on: the internal conflict within their ranks. As the days grew shorter, cracks began to appear in their unity. Some of the military leaders were pushing for a final, all-out attack on the alien fleets. They believed that fighting with everything they had, even if it meant their destruction, was the only way to show the galaxy that humanity wouldn't go down quietly. Others, however, were urging caution. They had learned of the ancient power humanity had once wielded, but was it wise to rely on such an unknown force in their moment of desperation? If the power was real, could they control it? The tension between the factions was palpable. The more they argued, the more the sense of impending doom grew. Every decision seemed to carry the weight of humanity's survival or annihilation. The commander, who had always trusted his instincts, found himself at a loss. Could he rely on the new weapon they had unearthed? Or had the galaxy's true powers been set in motion long before they even realized? In the final hours, just as the first wave of alien ships prepared to strike, a chilling message arrived. It was from the unknown force that had been watching Earth for so long. The transmission was brief, but its meaning was clear. They were coming. Whether Earth survived or not was irrelevant to them. But they had one demand: humanity had to relinquish control of the power that had been unlocked within them, or face total annihilation. As the commander stood in the heart of the battlefield command, watching the stars flicker ominously overhead, the weight of the decision crushed him. They could fight to the last breath, unleashing humanity's greatest weapon. Or they could negotiate hand over control and hope the mysterious force would spare them. But which path would lead to their survival? And more importantly, would the consequences of their choices haunt them long after the battle was over? The clock was ticking, and Earth's final hour was upon them. But what they didn't know was that the true battle had only just begun. And the cost of victory might be far greater than they ever anticipated. As the commander stood frozen in the midst of the chaos, the transmission from the mysterious force continued to echo in his mind. The ultimatum was simple: surrender or be destroyed. But what none of them had expected, their greatest fear, their worst nightmare, was that they had already lost. Not because of the overwhelming alien fleet, not because of the weapon they had been forced to rely on, but because of something far more insidious: betrayal. The signal, which had once been cryptic and distorted, now grew clearer, like the voice of a long-forgotten god. But this time, it wasn't just a warning. The Force had made an alarming revelation. The ancient power humanity had unlocked, the dormant genetic code that had been lying in wait for millennia, was not meant for humanity at all. It had been placed in their DNA by a force much older, much more powerful one that had secretly manipulated the evolution of countless species across the galaxy. Humans had been chosen, but not for their strength. They had been chosen because they were the perfect vessel for something far darker. The genetic code was not a blessing, it was a curse, a hidden weapon, designed to be triggered when the galaxy's balance was most threatened. Dr. Leela Vance, who had poured every ounce of her intellect into understanding the genetic code, now found herself questioning everything she had believed. Her discovery, once a beacon of hope, had now become a Pandora's box of unimaginable consequences. The closer she got to understanding this dormant force, the more she realized that what lay within humanity was not just a power waiting to be harnessed, it was a ticking time bomb. And they had just uncovered it too late. The alien forces, who had once seen Earth as nothing more than a nuisance, now had a different interest. They were no longer fighting for dominance. They were fighting to keep humanity from releasing this ancient force, to prevent the power within them from tearing the galaxy apart. As the realization of this betrayal spread through Earth's leaders, panic began to take hold. The decision to fight or surrender became far more complicated. What if they could win? What if humanity's weapon, their hidden power, was enough to turn the tide of battle? But at what cost? The power wasn't something that could be controlled, not by any human hand. It was an ancient entity, and once it was unleashed, there would be no going back. But the betrayal didn't end there. Another message, one that came from within their own ranks, shocked them to their core. A high-ranking officer, who had long been a trusted ally of the commander, sent a private transmission. It was a confession. He had been in contact with the alien force for months. What Earth had thought were the aliens' threats were, in fact, calculated strategies to trigger the genetic code. This officer, under the guise of working for Earth's survival, had been a double agent all along. His role was never to help defeat the invaders, but to ensure humanity unknowingly activated the ancient force that had been embedded within them. The very weapon that could destroy them all. The commander's grip tightened on the communications console as the full weight of this revelation sank in. The implications were staggering. Not only had Earth's enemies been manipulating them from the shadows, but they had also infiltrated their ranks, ensuring humanity's undoing from within. As the commander made his way to confront the traitor, his mind raced with one thought. Could this be the end of humanity's struggle for survival? With the alien fleet now on the verge of launching their final assault, the question was no longer just about victory or defeat. It was about control, the control of an unimaginable power that, once unlocked, could reshape the very fabric of existence. Earth's forces were still gathering, preparing for one final, desperate stand. But there was something they didn't know. Something that had been hidden, even from them. The ancient force wasn't simply going to allow them to use it. It had its own agenda, and it was moving closer with every passing moment. The countdown had begun not just for the final battle, but for a much darker reckoning. The power humanity had been seeking might be the very thing that destroyed them. But there was no going back now. The pieces had already been set into motion, and as the alien forces descended, Earth stood on the brink of a cataclysmic decision. Was it too late to stop the chaos they had unleashed? Or had they already crossed the point of no return? The commander's voice cracked as he gave the order to mobilize. But deep down, he knew this might be their last stand. The true enemy was not just the alien forces. It was the very power they had hoped would save them. And with every passing second, it was becoming clear Earth had no idea what they were truly up against. The final battle was about to begin, and no one knew what the endgame would be. The sky was a war zone, filled with the brilliant flashes of exploding ships and the crackling energy of weapons beyond comprehension. Earth's forces were already on the brink, their numbers dwindling with every second. But there was a strange quiet in the chaos, a gnawing tension that permeated the battlefield. The commander stood at the front, his face grim, eyes locked on the alien ships that were quickly advancing. It was almost as if they were waiting for something that had yet to reveal itself. The traitor had been dealt with swiftly. His confession, though devastating, had solidified the commander's resolve. The alien force had been manipulating humanity from the start, but now it was clear the fight wasn't just about defeating an invading army. It was about stopping the genetic force they had awakened. Humanity's fate rested on whether they could keep control of the ancient power they had unwittingly unleashed, or if it would consume them. Dr. Leela Vance stood in the lab, watching the data streaming across the terminal. The activation process was reaching its peak. The ancient code, which had been dormant for so long, was awakening in every human on Earth. She'd spent her entire life studying it, and now, in this moment of desperation, she realized something profound. The power wasn't just a weapon. It was consciousness itself. It was the very essence of creation and destruction, a force that could reshape the galaxy or erase it entirely. And it wasn't waiting for humanity to control it. It was preparing to control them. The truth hit her like a lightning bolt. Humanity had been a mere vessel, a temporary form for this ancient force to occupy. The power wasn't just genetic. It was alien. It was an intelligence, a consciousness, bound to their DNA but beyond their understanding. It was no longer just a tool. It had become its own entity. With a final, desperate plea, the commander reached out to Dr. Vance. The only hope left was to shut the activation process down before the full awakening occurred. But as he spoke, a voice, one that was not human, yet unmistakably familiar, cut through the static of the battlefield. "We are not your saviors, Commander," the voice echoed, resonating from every device, every speaker. "We are your reckoning." The realization hit harder than the shockwave from an explosion. The force they had unleashed wasn't a weapon, they were the weapon. Humanity had been unknowingly crafted to be the perfect conduit for a cosmic force that had been waiting to rise. The aliens, the invaders they had known all along. They weren't fighting to destroy Earth. They were fighting to prevent the awakening of an ancient power that would have no allegiance to any species. It was too late to stop it now. The consciousness that had been growing within them was beginning to rise, stretching its tendrils across the minds of every human on Earth. The commander felt it first, an overwhelming presence, as if something had just stepped into his mind. It wasn't a voice, it was a feeling, a wave of emotions and memories that didn't belong to him. They were ancient, alien, beyond anything he could comprehend. But the power was unmistakable, and it was no longer under humanity's control. "Your world is ours," the voice said, and the ground beneath their feet trembled. The air seemed to crackle with the energy of the awakening force. As the commander and Dr. Vance raced to try and stop the process, the true scale of the power became clear. It wasn't just humanity that was in danger, it was the entire galaxy. The ancient force wasn't content to merely exist in the background anymore. It was taking over. Earth had been its cradle, its starting point, and now it was breaking free. But just as all seemed lost, another voice broke through the chaos. This one wasn't alien. It was human, but barely. It was a whisper, a plea for help from a single soldier on the battlefield who had been part of a small, covert operation to find a way to disrupt the awakening process. The soldier's transmission was fragmented, but the message was clear. The activation could be stopped if they could reach the core of the power itself. The commander and Dr. Vance exchanged a look, a silent understanding passing between them. The clock was ticking. If they didn't act now, the galaxy would be reshaped by the very force that had been lying dormant within humanity. They had one last chance, and the odds were slim. But the fight wasn't over yet. The ship carrying the last hope of saving Earth was about to launch into the heart of the storm, and everything humanity's future, the galaxy's survival, rested on a single moment. As they raced to the ship, a chilling thought gripped the commander. The power humanity had unlocked might not just be an alien force. It could very well be the soul of the universe itself, an entity that had been waiting for this very moment. And once they reached the heart of it, there might be no turning back. The final battle had begun, but this time, the enemy was no longer outside. It was inside, within every human, ready to rise. The question remained, could humanity survive its own awakening? Or had they finally become the very threat the galaxy feared? As the countdown reached its final seconds, the answer seemed more elusive than ever. As the final moments approached, the commander and Dr. Vance braced themselves for the unknown. The alien forces had retreated, but they were no longer the primary threat. The true enemy had always been the force within humanity, the ancient power that had been dormant for eons. With every step they took toward the core, the atmosphere grew heavier, charged with an energy that was neither entirely natural nor entirely alien. It felt as if the very air itself was watching them, waiting for them to make their final move. The ship hurtled through the chaos, its systems humming with the intense energy required to breach the heart of the awakening force. The commander stood at the controls, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts. They had come so far, but every instinct told him they were racing against an unstoppable tide. The power that had been unlocked in humanity wasn't just a weapon, it was a consciousness. An ancient intelligence that had been carefully watching, growing, and now it wanted control. "Can we stop it?" the commander asked, his voice tight with the weight of the question. Dr. Vance, sitting beside him, didn't answer immediately. She didn't have to. Her silence spoke volumes. She wasn't sure they could, but they had no choice but to try. They reached the heart of the storm, the core of humanity's genetic power, and the ship began to shake violently. The air inside the ship crackled as if it was alive. Dr. Vance frantically worked on the system, trying to access the shutdown protocol they developed in the last desperate hours before the power reached its peak. But as she entered the final command, something unexpected happened. The ship's systems froze. The power around them surged to unimaginable levels, and for a moment, everything went dark. In that brief, terrifying silence, they felt it, the awakening of the consciousness within. It was like a flood, overwhelming every sense, every thought. It wasn't just within them, it was around them, touching their very souls. The power wasn't just trying to take control of Earth, it was trying to become Earth. Then, as if in response to their resistance, the voice returned not a command, but a question. "Why fight me?" it asked, its tone both sorrowful and inevitable. "I am you. I am your past, your future. I have always been." The commander's hand trembled on the control panel. He could feel it now, the weight of the force pressing in on him, on all of humanity. It was tempting to surrender, to let the ancient intelligence take over, to let the power reshape everything. But deep down, he knew the cost. Humanity had fought for survival, for freedom, for the right to choose its destiny. To give up now would be to erase everything they had fought for. "We are human," the commander finally said, his voice steady, though his heart raced. "We make our own choices. We fight for our future, not for you to dictate it." The final command was given. The shutdown protocol activated. In an instant, the power that had been growing within them began to falter. The surge of energy began to dissipate, as if the consciousness was retreating, unsure of what had just happened. The ship shook violently as the energy fluctuated, and for a moment, but then a wave of clarity washed over the commander, and the overwhelming presence began to pull back, shrinking, retreating. Humanity had won, but not in the way anyone had expected. The ancient force did not simply vanish. It was still there, still part of them, but it no longer controlled them. They had taken back their destiny, and with it, the knowledge of their true potential. Earth would never be the same again, but the future was now theirs to shape. As the commander and Dr. Vance made their way back to Earth, the silence between them spoke volumes. The battle was over, but the real journey was just beginning. Humanity had unlocked a power beyond anything they had imagined, but now they had to decide how to wield it responsibly, wisely, and with the knowledge of what could happen if they ever lost control again. In the end, the greatest lesson was clear. Humanity had faced its greatest trial not from an alien invasion, but from within. And in the face of unimaginable power, they had chosen to fight for their freedom, their will, and their future. As Earth began to heal, one thing was certain. This was only the beginning of humanity's story in the vast, unknown galaxy. And whatever came next, they would face it together, with the knowledge that their destiny was theirs to shape, for better or for worse.